Welcome to European Journeys. This is the fifth stage of a series that takes us to modern day Belgium and also to the north of France, where we explore some of the lives of the Walloons that changed the world. These were people who lived between the 16th and 17th centuries. They had adopted the Reformed faith, and for that reason, they had to flee their homeland in order to settle in lands in which they would be able to worship freely according to their Reformed faith, and they became a blessing for their lands, for their new lands. And the town we are going to visit today is called Avesnes-sur-Helpe. It's in the north of France today, but it used to be part of the Netherlands at the time. That was the southern part of the Netherlands, of course, to which Belgium today and the north of France were part of. And we're going to go there to explore one of these lives, of these Walloons that changed the world. Avesnes-sur-Helpe is a small town of 4,000 inhabitants, and the man we are going to talk about today, in fact, is well honored here, and that's quite rare. We've seen in previous stages how much these Walloon Protestants are ignored or forgotten, really, wherever they came from, in the towns and cities where they came from. But that's not the case for the man we are going to talk about today. His name was Jesse de Forêt. And in Avesnes-sur-Helpe, in fact, there's a school, a lyceum, called after him. But the place we are going to visit is a small square where there's a small park, a small grassy field, really, with a few trees. And along the road there, we find a memorial, a monument, with a text written in red. And the text goes like this in English. To Jesse de Forêt, his family and his valiant companions of the Walloon country, who sought a new world where they could in peace affirm their beliefs and practice the Reformed religion, have powerfully contributed to the foundation of New York, the biggest city of America, where Jesse's children Isaac, Henry, and Rachel settled in 1637. So here we go. Jesse de Forêt is one of the pioneers of New York. And in fact, quite strangely or quite surprisingly, he never visited America. He never went, in fact, to what would become New York. So how come he is considered to be one of the pioneers of New York? Well, this is what we are going to explore today. Jesse de Forêt, as I said, was born here in Avesnes-sur-Helpe. The year is probably the year 1576. And that's a year in which the area is really not stable at all. That's the beginning of the 8 Years' War, in which the Roman Catholic armies are trying to regain the land. And so it's not stable at all. There's a lot of killing happening in the area. And especially the Protestants are at risk, at great risk. And so the family de Forêt had to move away from Avesnes-sur-Helpe when Jesse was in fact a child. And they moved to a small town, which was a small principality at the time, called Sedan. Today it is in France. And the prince of that small independent principality had in fact adopted the Reformation. He was a Reformed believer. And so many Protestants moved to Sedan in order to find refuge. And that's what the family de Forêt did. So Jesse de Forêt lived his childhood, and he got married there. He met his wife, a French Huguenot named Marie Duclaux, and they got married in 1601. A year after that, his parents left the city of Sedan to go to the modern-day Netherlands, where the Reformed faith had been adopted and where many Protestants were fleeing. They went there as well, and they left the business to their son, that is, the parents left the business to their son Jesse. And so Jesse became a businessman there in Sedan. He had a business of wool clothings there. And but that would not last long. A few years later only, he moved also with his wife and his 4 little children. They moved to a small town called Montcornet. It's not far from Sedan, 80 kilometers west from Sedan in France. And he didn't stay there very long. In 1615, we find him actually in the modern-day Netherlands as well, in Leiden, to be reunited with his family. Now, 1516, that's only 5 years before 1620, obviously, And that's an important year for the history not only of Europe but of America, because that's the year when the Mayflower traveled from Europe to America, carrying obviously the first pilgrims, the first settlers, these reformed people who went away from England. They had moved to the Netherlands to find refuge there in order to practice their reformed faith, and then finally they moved to what was then New England. They arrived in Massachusetts, and they began their own colony there. And that was 1620. And the story of the Mayflower, this Mayflower that was going there, gave ideas to Jesse de Forest. And he thought what would be great would be to plant a Walloon colony there in America. I would like to build, in fact, a Walloon city, a city where the Walloons could settle there, speak their own language, practice their Reformed faith, and so live a bit like these first Reformed people who went to Massachusetts. Well, at the time there was no Dutch West India Company yet, so he went to the ambassador of England and asked if the Virginia Company could give them a ship in order to be able to travel there, where they would be able to plant a colony in this land of New England, and so a Walloon colony, a Walloon city. And sadly, the request was refused, or in fact, it was accepted, but at the condition that the Walloons would not build their own colony, but rather spread in the existing English-speaking colonies. That's obviously something that Jesse de Forest did not want. He wanted the culture of these Walloons to be protected, and it would not be so if they had to spread around all these colonies, or these English-speaking colonies. So the project was delayed. And finally, it's a Dutch ship that he would be able to obtain in order to put families, Walloon families, in it. That ship was called the New Netherland, and this ship went to what is today New York, so New Amsterdam at the time, along the Hudson River. But Jesse de Forest did not go with them, so he sent families there in order to settle to what was then New Netherlands. But as for him, in fact, he stayed there, and he received another offer, in fact, and that was to go and explore some lands in South America, in what is today Guyana. And so he embarked on another ship, and went there with a few other Walloon fathers, pères de famille, fathers of families, went there to explore the land in order to find out if building a city, building a Walloon colony would be possible there. And so they traveled there, and they arrived on the river called Oyapock, which is in fact the border between Brazil and today French Guyana. And they met some Indian tribes there, and they were very welcoming. In fact, the chiefs of the tribes had lived in Europe, and so there was some cultural connection there possible with the Indians there. They were received very favorably, and in fact, when Jesse de Forest asked them if there would be lands in which they could settle and build their own colony, the Indians were very favorable to that as well. So Jesse de Forest and his people went there, they explored a bit the land, and found out that yes, this land is good, we can do fishing, we can do hunting, we can do agriculture, there are precious metals, there's everything we need really to be able to plant a colony and to prosper here. So several of the pères de famille, fathers of families, went back to the Netherlands in order to pick up their family. Not Jesse. Jesse stayed there in order to explore more of the land. And one day during his explorations, he was attacked by a fever. And he had a strong fever. And he had to return back to the settlement where he was staying. And took time to recover, but a bit too short apparently. He was really eager to go back to his exploration travels, and so he went a bit too quickly. And a few days later, the fever came back even stronger, and finally took his life 3 days later. So Jesse de Forest died there, but his children, in fact, would embark and go to what became then later New York, to the New Amsterdam. But in fact, Jesse de Forest was one of the pioneers, because he was one of the first to send people there to what was then the New Netherlands. One last comment about Jesse de Forest is that he was called to be a diplomat among the Indian tribes. As I said, there were two favorable Indian tribes, but there was a third one which was a constant threat to these Indians. And they were once again threatening these two tribes. And Jesse de Forest was called to try to find an agreement with this threatening tribe, and he succeeded. And so the honor that with which he was treated there even grew all the more. So, as we can see, Jesse de Forest, who was a man that was really a pioneer for the New Netherlands, was also a man whose faith, in fact, allowed him also to settle peace between enemies. And he is a man that ought to be remembered. He is remembered in New York, and thankfully he is also remembered here in Avesnes-sur-Helpe. I'm Cedric Placentino. See you next week for another stage of European Journeys.